Okay, good evening everybody, or good morning, wherever you are. It's 8 o'clock in the evening here in England, and it's nice to see you all again. Yeah, I mean, I have been privileged to have out-of-body experiences since my early 20s. It started in the 70s, so it's over 50 years ago now. And they haven't really stopped. But they progress. They have they take on a different theme, I would say. What happened recently, and I think I started considering writing another book. This book will be quite different because the emphasis has changed a bit. I don't go out of my way to have out-of-body experiences. What happens now, I have out-of-body experiences when I'm invited. And that doesn't happen so often. And very often when I have an out-of-body experience, I don't know why I have it. I don't know what I have to achieve, what I have to do, what's going on, and basically it becomes clear when I look around, when I'm having an out-of-body experience, it becomes clear in due course the reason behind it. So what I've picked up is that I'm now being, I would say, like sent to certain areas. And it takes a few minutes before I know why I'm being sent there. And it became clear to me over the last sort of few years that I have to record certain observations which haven't been made before or which haven't been made public. So the next book is a bit of a challenge I'm working on because some of the things haven't been explored at all. And I've been entered territories which to me were totally new and totally unexpected. And that was one of the reasons why I liaised with a friend of mine who I met earlier this year, a chap called Mike, who I have already done 3 videos or 4 videos with. So we're holding conversations in order to bounce what we experience off each other to find some sort of consensus. And that has been very fruitful because a lot of the things which I have experienced, Mike has also experienced. And so we can be fairly sure that what we report about is some sort of reality which we both experience. I also know other people on Facebook who I communicate regularly with, where I bounce certain experiences off and they confirm it. And the moment they confirm it, we know we are on consensus reality, and what we experience then can then be entered into a roadmap or a layout of what the afterlife states involve. So now the thing is, I've been going into areas which made me almost uncertain because they were so new to me and so revolutionary that I had to completely reassess the whole fabric of what actually it means to go into an afterlife state, because we're entering a territory which is on a completely different vibratory level. And there are things happening in consciousness which under normal circumstances one would simply dismiss as a fantasy. So what I'm trying to do in my new book is I record all the experience I have, and then I meditate on them and find out what the reason is behind it, or the metaphysics behind it, or the physics behind it, and how that is came to be and what it means. So this is my biggest challenge at the moment. For example, to give you an example of how things work out, knowing that I had a talk tonight. So last night I wondered what I could possibly talk about. So it happened this morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I had an out-of-body experience. And that was really interesting because it relates directly to a question which Wendy sent me. For example, one of the questions was, oh yeah, are you aware of any recent exhibitions or other projects you have been doing on the other side? And that was really interesting because this project came up in my out-of-body experience. And just give you an idea of what happened, I became aware in a room on the astral plane when I sat opposite a guy who was staring at me very intently and very provocatively. He caught my eye and he said to me quite bluntly, "You don't belong here. What are you doing here?" And I stared back at him, and this sort of provocative question made me realize that I was out of body and I was on the astral plane. And it also made me realize that he could see that I didn't belong to his environment, that I came from a different level, really. And so I immediately noticed the energy of this atmosphere I was in, and then instead of sort of embarking on a conversation, I looked around in the room and I discovered on the walls there were sort of paintings, like graffiti. And instead of entering a conversation, I talked to him, "Oh, who did these wonderful paintings on the wall?" And he didn't respond to it and he left the room. And I then went out of the room and tried to investigate the astral environment. And I found myself in like a shopping center, which was underground, but without the shops. So there were lots of spaces, lots of white walls, tunnels and things like that. If you go through an underground car park or so on, it was quite dim. There were cafes, people were having coffee, they were grouping together, they were walking along and things like that. And what I noticed was there were a lot of drawings on the wall, a lot of graffiti. And what I found so incredible was that the graffiti was rather beautiful. It was quite random, as you would expect normal graffiti, but it was all done in crayon, in wax crayon. It was very finely, very sensitively executed. So I walked through this whole environment and took note of it. And then I asked somebody who came along, I said, "Who did these paintings?" And they said, "Oh yes, this is just graffiti, And then I sat down at a table, and then somebody sat down next to me, and he said, I notice you like the paintings. These paintings are done by such and such, And at that moment, I noticed opposite me there was a man about sort of 10 feet away who was sort of looking sort of sheepishly in my direction. And I immediately noticed that he was the artist, And the funny thing was, he came over. He came over to me, and I said to him, "Did you do all this?" He said, "Yes, I noticed you. Are you interested in my shit?" He said, So he said it in a rather dismissive way, and I said, "No, let's talk about it." And so I made friends with him in a way, and he said, "Well, you're the only person who has actually appreciated what I'm doing. Nobody else does. To most people here, it's just sort of graffiti, And I said, no, it's very beautiful. And then he said, "Are you an artist?" I said, "Yes, I've studied art." And then we talked a little bit about it. And then it comes to the question that I then, when I was talking to him, I pulled out of my shoulder bed my sketchbook. And I opened my sketchbook and I found, to my amazement, in my sketchbook I had sketches of a movie storyboard. And I have been thinking about, over the last few years, it would be nice to make a movie, you know. But I never sort of taken this idea seriously. But on the astral plane, I have already worked on a whole storyboard for a movie which I was planning, but I couldn't possibly do it because I don't have the resources or anything. And as we were going through this sketchbook of mine, I found an incredible number of sketches which I immediately recognized, sketches of paintings which were wall size, which I always wanted to do, but I never had the time to do it. And so that was to me a realization that on the astral plane we lead double lives. We can only do so much here in the physical life, but we have got alternative lives on the astral plane where we are much more productive, which we are not even aware of. And that was an incredibly interesting experience, because Wendy asked me in the past, you know, I mentioned in the past that I have exhibitions of my work there, and there are some quite important exhibitions in big galleries, and so I recognize the work being mine, but I don't recognize the style immediately. So we are very versatile individuals, human beings. We only focus one part of our full potential here on this planet. And the fact that we are multidimensional entities has become clear to me many times in the past. And one thing which I became very aware of, that I very often find myself teaching when I'm going out of body, that I have a group of people with whom I talk about consciousness and out of body experience. And one particular experience was where I became conscious in the hall. In a hall, I became conscious, and as I walked outside, there was a group of people who I recognized instantly as my students. And I had just been away from the group, and we have been talking about consciousness. And then I said, what about if this, what we are experiencing here, is only one part of it, and that I have another life on a completely different level from which I just returned in order to report to you about it. And the thing was, I was so incredibly conscious and aware at that time that to me it was no problem to accept the fact that I actually was leading two lives, and there was no break in between the two lives. So I immediately picked up on the astral level where I had left off before I went out into my physical body, and that all happened while I was meditating. You know, so I was conscious while I was meditating, then I went to the other level, and when I went to the other reality, I remembered that I was meditating on this physical level. So there was this dichotomy of two realities, which I tried to explain via this very practical experience to my group of students. So this is the sort of thing which is happening more and more, that I now find myself in aware that we are multidimensional beings, and that there is not a great sort of difference between what kind of reality we are in. Of course, that can be a problem if our mind is not integrated, because I know from people, I used to work as an art therapist in mental hospital, I worked with people who were classified, diagnosed as schizophrenic, and they also lived in two realities, and they were talking to me about it. And at that time, that was in the 70s, I already had out-of-body experience. I could totally sympathize with what these people were talking about, but they were diagnosed as being sick. But what it was, in fact, I found when I talked to them normally, they weren't actually mentally ill. You know, they were quite normal, except they had they didn't have the filters to discriminate between one or the other of the realities they were in. So they were, when they spoke about the other reality, they were simply told by their doctors that they are sick and they need to have certain medication. But of course, these sort of things, if you are not integrated, can easily escalate and can drive the people quite mad. And there's a very good film which is called A Beautiful Mind. I don't know if anybody has seen it, which is a very, very, very accurate description of what it's like to live in two realities at the same time. And so I just want to put this out at the beginning of this. I've never really been that interested in out-of-body experiences. My main focus has always been to meditate and focus on the inner light. And my meditation practice is such that when I focus on the light, I don't focus on the light seeing it as separate from me, then I focus on the light by becoming the light. You know, so to not only focus on it, but get the feeling of the light. So that has become a meditation technique which I've been practicing for the last sort of 12 years. And by doing so, you don't separate between yourself and the light. Basically, what happens, you are the light. And that is, this kind of focus can actually lead to a very high spiritual experience where you attain some kind of unity consciousness, because we have to bear in mind that that is actually our natural condition. There's our natural state. We are the light, we are unity consciousness at our core. So it's not something extraordinary or something special that only happens to special people. It is within all of us. So if we adopt the viewpoint that we are already the light, then we become the light. And in this effect, and what happened in this instance was when I was focusing on the light, I became the light and I radiated it out, and I could feel I was radiating it out. And then what happened on the astral level where I was at that time, which was fairly dim, suddenly a lot of people started looking into my direction, and I noticed, and they were all sort of coming towards me. And now the other thing, going back to my initial story, which is quite interesting, where I met this artist, after we spoke together, and he said to me, "You are the only person who really acknowledged that I'm an artist, you know, who appreciated my work." And by doing so, he really cheered up, and his spirit was lifted. I could feel it. And at the same time, I noticed that his work, which was all over the place, it started becoming much more vibrant. The colors became much more vibrant. And it had a radiation simply by him owning his work and being confident and being cheerful about it and finding his niche. His role all along has been to brighten up these lower dimensional near-Earth levels. And by me just providing a trigger to him, his work became alive and brightened up the environment he was in, the lower dimensional level, which was a near-Earth level. So this is what I'm talking about, that I don't know what's going to happen when I have an out-of-body experience. At the beginning, I don't know why I'm having it, why I'm at the places I'm at. So from now on, or over the recent years, I just allow myself to be at a place. I don't seek any out-of-body experience. I just go along with it. And very often it turns out, sometimes some very minor things happen, that there is a good reason for being where I am. So that's just